that first, and then cool, going live now. Let's see what happens. Oh, setting up your meeting. Right. Cool beans. Let's see what happens. Cool. Says that we're live. Let's go for it. Cool. So first thing I'll say is a little disclosure statement. Sometimes we have some bad language on the show. Sometimes we talk about things that some people don't like. If you're not a fan of either taboo topics or unsavory language, you can close the video and move on to something else. Keep scrolling. Otherwise, stick around for the second edition of Homie and the Dude. And today we're joined by Ella Joy. She's a close friend of mine and new to Tom. I wanted to first, Ella, when me and Tom were talking about this, we kind of decided that we should probably introduce you, give a little bit of information about how you and me know each other, and then get into some stuff. So, what I wanted to ask was, first of all, what was meeting me and like getting to know me from your side like? Because obviously I know my side. What was your side like?
Yeah, it's so lovely that that's the first kind of opener, because I was kind of preparing and I was thinking how lovely that this friendship has formed so organically, and I feel quite profoundly. So I definitely encountered you as within a workspace. It was like a bright beam of enthusiasm every morning, and you, I've mentioned this before, you met me when I was coming out of a really hard time in my life, a lot of emotional bruises going on there, and there was definitely kind of, without realizing, like a passive nurturing that's kind of evolved really beautifully, and I feel like there was definitely a boost every morning when I could enter the workspace and I could ignite this kind of force that would allow me to, work on my emotional processing whilst in a workspace, trying to, keep it all together. So, it was a really like foundation, a big foundation for, I would say, some form of emotional recovery. And it was so inspiring to watch you kind of emanate that to everyone. The amount of energy that you are able to accumulate is amazing. And definitely, I think, just a massive healing emission.
Thank you I really appreciate that. So what Ella's referring to is that we worked at a charity fundraising call center together, and as she kind of arrived, I had just been promoted to being one of the team leaders, and Ella was in my first batch of like callers that I basically got to manage, and was like head and shoulders the best one, like, and also some of the people already like what we called like out of the probation period, like the graduates, basically. She was up with those guys and competing with them. So that was my impression on my side, though, when you first came in, was that you were extremely eclectic because of your dress and your like fashion, and walk in usually wearing some sort of Japanese garment with some sort of waistcoat and chukka boots with some like cargo pants. And I'm like, I don't know how it all went. So that was always like, I know me and Nikki talked about that a lot as something that we loved, coming to work and seeing what you were going to be wearing. So that was a really nice thing when we first started meeting you. And again, I think also because you did meet me at a time where I had just stepped into a role where I had a lot of responsibility. You also got a lot of nervous me at the time. Like, I wasn't the confident me that was there like maybe 2-3 months before I left, that knew the job, was running the floor with Sven, like it was a big different person to the one that you got when you were in Grad Bay, when I was a bit more timid and actually a lot of the time it would be like in our sessions, so we would have talks before every like a quarter of the day, and basically where I would give pep talks basically, and half the time it would be me being like, so guys, this is what I think, how'd I do? And you guys would be like, you're doing great. But no, yeah, it was a really refreshing experience to have you on the team, more also for your honesty as well, like your level of honesty and just being such a down-to-earth person was so refreshing amongst all the NTT chaos, which is what it really was.
Well, it's so interesting that you bring up this kind of the nervous semantics of your kind of presentation, because I didn't actually acknowledge that at all.
That's funny. Yeah,
so
no.
You definitely pulled it off.
It was just inside nervousness. I was wanting to do the best for you guys because I wanted you guys to achieve and so on. But yeah. So a couple of things that I want to talk about. Currently we're in lockdown, and I know something that you're meant to be doing right now is you're meant to be in Japan. Now I just came before lockdown and then got locked down, and you were meant to be going really soon thereafter. I basically came back, but then lockdown happened. So what I actually want to ask is, rather than how terrible you feel about being trapped here in the UK, what inspired you to go to Japan? What like gave you this reason to step out of the UK in such an interesting time of the year? Like in what was it, like I think early February to April time, weren't you thinking? Or was it
yeah, it would be from March, but yeah.
So yeah, break that down for us. Like tell us what was that?
So for some reason, and I find it mysterious and beautiful all in one way, but I feel that there's like a soul resonance with Japan that's just been kind of calling into my day to day since I was a child. I remember watching Spirited Away when I was quite young, and it just hit me. I was just zapped in, and I just think, what a beautiful introduction to, obviously, Hayao Miyazaki is trying to create this amazing world for children to look up to, a female protagonist that's not sexualized, that's not just, actually not an adult, which I think is quite important. I think kids are often looking up to adults without having people their own age to look up to. And, someone like Chihiro, who's so kind of innocent but vibrant in her ambition, was definitely, exciting for me to see. And I'm pretty sure my first crush in the world was Kohaku. So
I would agree with. Talking about the whole female protagonist bit, like I watched it again at a very young age. Actually, me and Tom watched it when we were in Spain. I know, Tom, you absolutely loved it as well.
Did love it, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that I think no matter what state you're in, it's so beautiful, it's so moving. Like whatever mood you're in, you could be angry going in, you could be happy, sad, whatever, and that movie will then ring you through all the emotions again and leave you out at the end feeling like all warm and fuzzy. And I think your point though about having Chihiro as this really beautiful, like, person to look up to. Like I think often in Western culture, people never think of the idea that humans could look up to cartoons or like see inspiration through cartoons and stuff. And I think that's something that I agree, like Japanese people do really beautifully. And like having like role models within fictional worlds that, like you said, she's coming of age, she's not sexualized, she's an absolute badass that also grows story as well. You
totally
her become more of this badass, and I think your points are 100% on. Not to mention how beautiful the filming and the colors.
Totally. I've got one of the books where it kind of shows all of the processings behind, so all the effects, all of the kind of layers. It's gorgeous. But I do think what's quite poignant about the Studio Ghibli stuff is that it's an alternative to a Disney culture, which I think we can all agree presents a lot of troubling issues for people. It presents so many constructs for us to just adopt without even thinking about it. And I think particularly within romance, it seems to just be happening all the time. Disney just whacks this idea of love on top of you, and you kind of just gulp it and then get on with your life, and then have this kind of ambition to somewhat fulfill what you think is the right role to do. Whereas obviously there is a beautiful kind of intimacy presented in the Studio Ghibli stuff, but I don't think it is in the same universe as the Disney kind of role models that are presented to us. And I think that just kind of represents, obviously, Japanese culture when it comes to sexuality is completely different to anything we can perceive in England. And obviously there are so many painful and hurtful nuances of, you know, their kind of expression of their sexuality. But I think within the media context, especially when you're presenting ideals to kids, you know, something as tender as the kind of support network between all of the characters, it's so nuanced and I think a lot more enriching than a lot of the Disney movies that we see.
So interesting. Like so the way you guys have described it, and I love your characterization, Ella, of how culture is driven a lot by things like Hollywood or by corporations or by mass marketing, and not only does it drive sort of an agenda, but it forms our like moral compass as well. It forms like our value system in a weird and
absolutely
damaging way. And yeah, and it's refreshing to hear you guys just like so in tune with the machine and being able to step outside the machine and say like the machine is doing this to people, and you know there's different ways to portray story, and
absolutely.
so there's a Japanese way to do it, and but I think the point is really well taken about how subtle and nuanced Japan is. But when you were saying that, and I've spoken to Bodhi a little bit about his time in Japan, I'm not sure if it translates to the population because there's some weird shit going on in Japan.
But that's why it's a fantasy, isn't it? And that's why it has to come through the media system, because it's not a universally acknowledged kind of ideal that is in practice in people's day-to-day. And I guess one reason why I wanted to go was to be like, okay, so what is it then? You know, I've watched hours of documentaries and, you know, I've just tried to kind of absorb as much knowledge as possible, but I just wanted to sit in it and be like, why am I attracted to this? What is actually going on? And what's the reality of this? I just want to sit in it and just absorb it and really kind of have a nice intimate look. And then there's the food culture, which is a massive, massive influence.
Yeah, 100%. I think your whole point about, you know, wanting to go there and really discover what it's like was like one of the bigger shocks for me in terms of actually, I was not surprised by how beautiful the country was. That's like, I'd seen enough photos and I've been in love with samurai since I was like, since I could hold a plastic sword, I've been in love with samurai. So for me, it's like, you know, going and seeing the place was not the surprising part, even though, don't get me wrong, there's things that you're blown away by nonetheless. It's more the people and how, one, technologically advanced they are, the organization level. Like, dude, in the UK, trains are late. Like, it's you can assume your train is just going to be
totally
okay. Like, at this point, people just assume, cool, it's likely it'll be at least 1 to 2 minutes late, if not longer than that.
Yeah.
In Japan, there's just no such thing. Like, it does.
Totally.
Like, the organization and the order is on a whole nother level. It's so perplexing and so beautiful.
It's militant down to the civilizationary level.
It's due to like 400 years of like shogun rule that pretty much imparts martial law upon them. You know, so they literally, they're used to stepping out of line and then someone beheading you. Like, that's just it. Like, so it's a very interesting culture that is seeped down through the ages, and it's crazy that tradition, still with the level of technology that is progressing in Japan, has remained to the level that it really has. Like, especially in places like Kyoto and like further out, like in Nara and places like that. There's really beautiful, natural, like old traditional culture there.
I find it quite interesting. Oh, sorry, Tom.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I find it quite interesting because my perception on Japan is that despite the militants that we kind of just acknowledged, there seems to be, within the kind of philosophy levels, just a real message of surrender, which is quite a nice kind of juxtaposition. I wonder whether one informs the other. And I think it's a message that is way more prevalent in kind of the Eastern areas, particularly around Asia, you know, that message of surrender being being like such a primary teaching, way more than we would find here. You know, I think we've often reached out to Eastern cultures to look for those messages that can enrich our willingness to really sit into this kind of presence. So it's just quite interesting that, you know, out of such a militant culture, I wonder where it kind of snuck in there, you know, this kind of fundamental acknowledgement and practice, just regular practice that is so kind of historically kind of present.
Yeah. I mean, it's also interesting because for me, one of the most hilarious things that I loved learning about while I was there was the complete difference between how they are some of the most aggressively violent human beings in history, but also some of the most peaceful, like relaxed, meditative, like well thought out human beings as well. And the interesting bit was seeing how like Buddhism interacted with their like historical culture in the way that, you know, we asked like loads of people like a bunch of questions, and one that I loved asking was like, how does Buddhism relate to like this? Like, how does that make sense in terms of the line that Buddhism sits on? That's a little bit off. For example, things like samurai and people like that, and the whole shogunate, all of that is just very obscure. And it's more, I found out that they practice it more to use it as a mental like weapon.
Totally. Yes.
It's a mental power that they have because they're like, I'm so in tune and focused and ready to receive and also maneuver. And it's like, it puts them in this beautiful space. And I think that's another thing that around the world people should be striving for, is that, don't get me wrong, not the extreme level of military like force, but the balance of being so zen, but also having the ability to use the, I guess, the dark side sometimes for good, I guess would be the only way that I could put it. But yeah.
Really interesting.
I can't say that I have any experience within moving my body within those kind of ways, but I'm wondering whether the kind of Buddhist philosophies, which I think are really akin to things like Advaita Vedanta, you know, Hindu philosophy, it is somewhat universal, but I feel like the Buddhist philosophy of experiencing your boundaries, experiencing presence, and really trying to understand to what extent am I here, and where is the location of my experience. It kind of makes me wonder, when you're in those kind of art forms of when you're using your body, that expansion and your understanding that you are actually beyond the vessel, it probably informs the practice as well. So I think they are quite symbiotic, you know, in that flow state of realizing that you are boundless. You can probably kind of access so many more ways of moving in combat because you are interacting with yourself kind of on a kind of exponential scale.
Yeah, like 100%. And but the other funny thing that, you know, me and Nikki, my girlfriend, found out when we were there was they believe this beautiful tradition, and when samurai fight samurai, yeah, it's totally like, it's cool, like that works. But if you were to get like someone else in there who like doesn't care for rules, oof, geez, this is not good times.
They're complicated, aren't they? I mean, they're just so,
yeah.
The spectrum of just sort of extreme stuff going on is pretty substantial, right?
Yeah.
So you have all the violence, but then you have, yeah, the real sort of in peace with nature as well, and then you have some, you know, some bizarre stuff going on just in modern times where there's so much honor and pride of being able to be self-sufficient and to provide and things like that, and feeling massive pressure, and that leaks out in different weird ways, and there's just a lot going on, you know, that, and you think about it, right? So in like humanity, there's different little like test tubes that stuff has been thrown into that has created that culture, right? And so like whether it's the historical advancement of that civilization, or, you know, certain leaders that have driven certain agendas or whatever, and that has informed how people actually operate in that culture. And I would say Japan, like, I've never been there, but just from certainly, and like I was thinking when you were talking as well about surrender, the Bodhi just talked a lot about Hiroshima, and the Japanese's attitude toward that whole like that whole era, and it's so different than you would think. And I think your point, Bodes, was that like every world leader should come here, just for a moment, just to understand what happened in history. And it was yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, it's really interesting.
It's because, interestingly, again, conflicting their own selves in terms of having very little communication in terms of emotions amongst one another, you often then find the crazy part is when something like this crazy tragedy in Hiroshima happens, their whole philosophy is we need to write about this. We need to get this out. Like people need to know, and like they need to understand, and they need to experience the pain that was felt here. And, in going there, like the main memorial was horrible. Like it's beautiful, but it's
harrowing.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I don't know. I think Japanese people are some of the most beautifully interesting human beings on this planet, for sure. Like they definitely surprise me at every turn, but also keep me on my toes at every turn in terms of providing something new and different that I'm not even expecting. Whether that be a gush of water, hit me in the ass, or a new way to say a word, or whatever it may be, they're all over the place.
What about going into like the 4-story arcade and watching them like geek out completely on stuff, or just like there's so many weird little things that they're amazing with, like their passions toward different things.
Yeah.
Yes. There's like a diligence, isn't it, that I really recognize. It can take someone a lifetime to perfect the art form of buckwheat soba noodles. Like, just gorgeous. That passion, like that dedication is, I just think, just profound.
100%. I really agree. One thing that I look up to a whole culture of people, no matter how repressed they may be, the drive within that, like, I was saying to Tom when we came back, like after seeing Asian culture like China and Japan specifically, watching them build things versus English people build things is the most like hilarious thing I've ever experienced. Like watching a road get paved in a day in like Japan, like we walk past it like 1 hour, come back 2 hours later, it's paved, painted, lines are on it, and cars are already bloody going. In the UK for like Temple Meads Road to be torn up. Like, dude. Like,
mastery of efficiency.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly a good way to put it. Is like efficient down to like every like facet of the word, basically. Yeah. Go on, Tom.
No, I was just thinking they do it in business as well. They do. I'm trying to think of what it's called. Anyway, in production, well, you've seen it in automobile production, like back in the day. This is before your guys' time, but Japanese automobile production like pretty much revolutionized economic quality. Like there used to be like shit, which was basically just cheap manufacturing that was cars that would, break down and have problems. And then there was like Germany, which was which was just like, German engineering, but really expensive. There was no middle area, which was quality that people could afford. And Japan just went in there, really like locked down efficiencies and produced this sort of middle, sort of this middle class of cars that, everyone now, aspires to, basically. And it's, but that's just an example of what you're talking about, this mastery of efficiency. Really cool.
100%. Ella, something else that I know you do a lot of stuff in your spare time. You're one of the, like, out of all the people that I know, you're one of the most active in terms of hobbies and like side projects that you have just like going on all over the place. I know you do a lot of music, and you're heavily involved with the music industry in terms of some of the work that you're currently doing. But also, I know that you've been in bands in the past. I know that you generally, you and me talk about music fairly often and have a lot of like similarities.
Yeah.
Give me one, let's maybe start with like your musical journey, like what inspired you originally to like create music, and then maybe talk about some of your stuff that you enjoy listening to. I don't know. Go.
Nice. Cool. Well, something that I've acknowledged as like a kind of ongoing characteristic of myself is that I seem to cherish privacy in very certain areas of my life, and it's probably because I grew up with a house with no doors. The only door was the front door. So me and my parents basically just shared one room. So exploring things such as a passion for audio was something that I definitely tried to keep contained, because I was really tentative and I was learning my boundaries and what worked and what didn't work. So I was basically it started off with vocals. I think that's probably the easiest thing to access because it's free and it's you. But I used to, when my parents were at work, they would come home and I would shut up. But in that small space between finishing school and then coming back from work, I was kind of practicing in my room, and it was I think for me accidental. I guess kind of the philosophy of scatting, really, I was kind of able to explore. So just kind of allowing a stream of consciousness to manifest through me. And that came out with my voice. And then I was like, oh, this is quite exciting. But I didn't tell anyone, and I didn't want to show anyone because I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know what I was doing, or I kind of just didn't really have an opinion. It was just something that I would definitely do every day by myself. And one day I was in the car with my mum and my friend. I must have been 14. And my other friend had just been performing in this lovely drama performance. And my friend in the car with me said, well, Ella can sing that song. And I looked at her like, how dare you? But she was really sweet because she wanted to kind of share something that I didn't really realize that she'd kind of picked up from me, but obviously it'd come out in some way. And my mum convinced me to sing in the car, and she was like, I'm not gonna look, I'm gonna keep eyes ahead. And I was like, this is mortifying, absolutely mortifying. But anyway, I did it. I remember like my heart going so much. I was like, this is such an invasion of privacy, but also liberating. And my dad's a music producer, so I grew up with like a home studio in the house. So my mum got home and was like, Ella can sing. And my dad was like, upstairs, studio now. So that was kind of how it happened. And you know, I was kind of very aware at the time of how grateful I was to have parents that were able to be like, we want to support you in an artistic way. You know, and I think definitely they came from a space in their upbringing that was definitely probably more orientated between the ideas of like industrial practice, a real job. You know, there was definitely not much space for creative practice. So I think, you know, when they procreated and I came out and I took an interest in kind of, you know, my creative side, they were like, we want to go there with you, let's do it. But what I found really fun was making the instrumentals, and obviously the music, the singing was great, but I was like, I like synths and I like the electronic stuff. So I started producing. It was a couple of years after. It took me a little while to kind of get into that space, but yeah, I got Logic, which is, I think, a really nice way to enter. And yeah, just started making beats. I moved out when I was 16, so I had a lot of kind of space for the first time. You know, I had a bedroom door, so I got to lock myself away and just kind of then started to unravel what made me sing, and you know, making those sounds like an instrumental that made me want to sing, and that was a really great process. So then it was kind of from there, I was like, great, this is something that's really driving me every day. And I went to study at uni. Music industry practice was the title, but I came there as a solo artist, and I came out in a band. So that was quite a plot twist, but nourishing in so many ways, because I think the removal of the identity, that it just had to be me and my sound, it's such an exposing position to be in. I think being in a band with other people, it allows you to sing within your own glory, but not have to kind of worry that people are just looking at you, you know?
Can I just interject for a moment?
Yes,
I'm hearing
done.
no, it's okay. No, I'm just hearing outside people are clapping, so I just want to acknowledge that it is the 8 o'clock time, and
let's acknowledge.
yeah, just acknowledge that that's happening right now, and throw out lots of gratitude towards people that are helping us in ways that they've just found themselves in this situation, and they've accepted it, and they're doing amazing things for us. So put that out there to anyone that's listening.
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, 100%. Ella, a couple things that I picked up on. One, just Tom echoing your message 100%, especially even like all the way through, like down to people on the phones at 111, like all the way through, like, dude, everyone in the NHS is kicking ass right now. Yeah. Ella, in terms of some things you mentioned, geez, like I love how you described the arc, and like a couple of things I picked out, like the moment with your mum in the car, like as much as like, one, that's a beautiful story. I think that's like so great. It's going to be one you're going to be able to tell for like so many years. But it's also such a big mum play. Like that is a big moment as a mum, like stepping up and like committing to, like, I respect your mum hella for that. Like that's a great mum move. And I think also, obviously, you being the person that you are, you've obviously grown into it more and more, but I assume you were still very open at a young age. Like, I'm sure you received that quite well. Not only that, but also you said you moved out at the age of 16. Like, for me, I moved out when I was, technically when I came back from traveling, so 19, but if you count before I went traveling, it would be like 18. So like, there's a couple of years apart, and in my opinion, those couple of years make the biggest difference, because I really developed myself between the ages of like 16 and maybe 20 is when I like really found a lot of maturity and a lot of strength and a lot of all of that. And I think, you know, it makes me go, man, I'm not sure if I could have lived by myself when I was 16 and supported myself and done all of that. So break that down a bit for me quickly before we move on with some more music stuff, but break that.
So I definitely agree with your kind of sentiments around that kind of 18 to 20, even 16 to 20, like fundamental years. And it's so funny, I was saying this with a friend the other day. I feel like everyone probably feels this, but every year I get, I'm like, and I'm sitting in it, and I'm sitting in it, and it's just like this whole amazing experience. And I just think when we look back, it's all so fundamentally formational. But I think there is a vulnerability within that 16 to 20 period that's definitely kind of stand out, isn't it? And I think because of that vulnerability, that was exactly why I wanted to be by myself. So I found school very challenging. It was not easy. I essentially tended to have older friends, which was great for the years that they were in school. However, the last lot of friends that graduated suddenly exposed the reality that I didn't have many friends in my year, which was fine. I had like 3 to 5 like core friends that were great people, but there was a really painful crumbling of that friendship within a very similar time to my older friends leaving. So it essentially rippled down to what my friends have had to tell me, Ella, that was bullying. But I just saw it as a very painful time, essentially. So the idea of kind of going to the next stage of school, the school system with these people, was just not an option for me. Well, it was, obviously I'm lucky to have another option, which was to move out. But I think, you know, for my own psychological state, it was really important for me to kind of detach from that period and actually have the opportunity to have those formative years in a fresh space where I could actually really enjoy experiencing myself, as opposed to having to feel like I've got to hide away because it's, you know, painful to expose. So yeah, that was it really. There was an amazing performing arts opportunity at a performing arts sixth form. So I auditioned and I got it, and I was like, whew, here we go, fresh start, let's do it.
Nice. You know, like I think you're totally right about. I think the fresh start, I hadn't even thought about it being like a clean fresh start and being able to like almost maximize potential because it's a complete fresh start and you're like in this new creative environment and stuff. I think that's pretty badass. When I think about it, that's a really good point.
What were you going to say, Tom?
No, yeah. So a couple things really. The first was I chuckled a little bit when you said, you know, you get to the next little stage of age, and you're like, I didn't know shit back then. Now I know everything, and that continues on to
absolutely.
Yeah. But it's very, very dramatic. Like I specifically remember having like these step level looking down at like from let's say 24 down to 20 and being like, oh my God, what was I thinking? Like those were big like mental adjustments on my perspective on reality and what was important, what wasn't, just about me and all of that. I thought that was yeah, really, really interesting. Yeah, so
Tom, you also moved out. What age did you move out, or was it?
no,
you did something reckless at a young age, didn't you?
No, not really. I mean, like I went to the equivalent of uni, we call it college in the States, and was in college until my my senior year, and then we had a family tragedy. My brother died in a car accident, and so I did make a hard turn like into getting away from everything and yeah, trying to figure things out, you know, in a completely different way. But yeah, so in that way, there was definitely some extreme decisions and behavior, but a lot of it was just based on, I don't know, running away, trying to yeah, just trying to figure things out, trying to survive, trying to just cope with that. Yeah.
And
but yeah,
was that a solo venture?
Yeah, so I mean, there was a combination of the family coming together when my brother died, and then very soon thereafter, just like people coping and mourning in different ways. And my way was just to like jettison. I was 20, I think I was 21 at the time, so I'd lived outside of the house for 3 or 4 years. To come together and be with my family was needed for a period of time, but was, you know, just not feasible for you know, for me to be in that space anymore. So I needed to get out of the space. But I probably wasn't ready to be out like on my own either. So I was in this no man's land of neither wanting a lot of family support nor being able to cope on my own outside of that. So it was definitely a floundery period of time, really, until I met Tracy, which was like, you know, 5 years later. And then she came from a similar path. And then we joke about it in a way by saying we kind of held each other up for, you know, we're both sort of teetering, and we both sort of just kind of, you know, held each other up. And that was that time. But yeah, the whole like progression of knowledge and of consideration of where I am and how I'm evolving continues. The incline sort of levels out, and your accumulation of perspective builds and builds and builds. So there's not these big, huge epiphanies, as it were. At least not for me. Maybe other people are having those, but it continues, right? You're still learning. You're still learning. You're still figuring out this thing, right? This machine, how it works, how it's like, how it sabotages itself when it's at its best, when it's just sort of like cyclically, like how physically it feels sometimes, how physically it's at its best. Sometimes it's tired, sometimes it's hungry, sometimes it's, you know, hungry in different ways. And all of that is a learning process that you can't read a book and get it. You just have to kind of find those experiences and grab as many of them and try to retain as many of them. And some of them you just keep bumping into the same thing over and over and over again. You don't learn that thing for a long time, and that probably continues until, you know, some will just be lessons unlearned, right? But certainly some, you've got it. You know how to deal with that thing, which is a really cool feeling as you get older and older. Yeah.
It's like forming a deeper intimacy with yourself. I think that's kind of how I feel when I feel like I'm sitting into it every year. Like I'm sitting into myself, and I'm sitting into, you know, like you say, the boundaries, the triggers, the kind of the optimum prime environments and the deprecative environments. And I think I've definitely been very kind of self-critical in my life, kind of ongoing. And I think every year that I accumulate, I think the next stamp is being like able to relax into that and being able to be kind of more respectful towards myself. Definitely, that's how it feels for me, that significance of age every year.
It's a big thing. It's a huge thing. Like, kindness towards yourself is, for me, it's probably the biggest thing, because I know for me personally how, and the consequences of not being kind to yourself, right? So you aspire to do certain things, you aspire to have certain behaviors, whether you're getting these messages from the external world about what you can be and what you should be, and all you need to do is just do it, and, you know, all this stuff, right? And that's not at all how life is. Life is this sort of continual 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And you see the messaging, which is like, if you do it this way, you will sprint to the front of the class. And it doesn't work that way. And so this concept of being kind to yourself when you don't have it, when you are not at your best, when you have a bad day. When I was younger, at your guys' age, if I had a bad day, that bad day would turn into a bad 3 days, week, 2 weeks, sometimes month. So that little hiccup, I would beat myself up and sort of magnify that into being this big thing. And one of my biggest lessons learned is just be kind to yourself about that little thing. That's okay. Like, accept it. It's part of living. And that allows you to get back on the track just a little bit faster. And that's a wonderful lesson to learn. The earlier, the better. Yeah.
The way I like to call it is just enjoy the little things. Enjoy the little things and give yourself the little wins. Like, that's it's like, and Tom, you kind of told me this from like a young age through sports mainly. And it was like, cool, so you learn how to do a right-handed layup. Now work on your steps for left-handed. Oh, you can do the steps now? Cool, that's a win. You've got the steps. Don't do it with the ball, just do the steps. You got
gentle.
Move on to the next bit. Now, and like, ignore, that's the thing that, like, I know loads of people, I know so many of my friends and people close to me that don't allow themselves to acknowledge the little wins, and thus the picture ends up being too big to try and move forward and progress, whether it be internally within yourself or within successful, you know, business practice or hobbies or whatever it may be. You know, it's often a case that people, like you said, self-sabotage by not allowing themselves to go, hey, I've achieved something today. Like, I achieved something today, and that is badass. You know, like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I've started doing these little, oh, sorry, you muted. That was bad timing from my part.
Go for it.
I've started doing some, I call them self-love letters to myself. The kind of the hard part of my life that I met you in, Bailey, one thing that was really formational for me and transformational was journaling. But that's now developed into, I do video logs, just like chatting to myself for hours, just getting it all out. And another thing that, that's developed into as well is when I don't have access to that, or those kind of utilities, just writing reminders. So kind of acknowledging the things that I usually pull myself up, or acknowledging the things that, you know, are just for some reason hard to shift. You know, there's that pain going on there. Giving myself cues so that I can read it and be like, you know what, this is how I work, but I can acknowledge that and I can love that, and actually reminding myself that that's how I work. And also I'm active and I'm proactive and I'm doing these things, and, you know, just reminders. And something that keeps coming up recently in my writings is just this "you are worthy" message. And I think that's probably one of the biggest kind of reminders I'm giving myself at the moment. And it's really nice to just read it and kind of keep letting that out and kind of staring at it as if it's a mirror back.
Do you know what's interesting about that message specifically? I think at this time in the world, like, I think everyone can do with a bit of that message right now. But I think the fact that that message is making its way around women right now is so important. Like, that is so badass that, you know, it's fine. Like, and it's finally cool that with social media that there's this corroboration. Like, I was talking to Nikki about it today in terms of, I saw a post and it was mentioning, you know, like, just very femme positive, very like bigging up women and confidence like that. I was a little disappointed at the end because they're trying to sell something, but I was like, the whole rest of the post, badass. I was like, the rest of that post is incredible. Like, women should be reading this. This is amazing. But regarding the bottom part, leaving that to one side. But, you know, yeah, it's something that's so important. I'm glad that you're on board with what it seems a lot of femme power is doing at the moment. A lot of stuff for women is happening at the moment in that way, and I think that's awesome. Go for it. What were you going to say?
I definitely identify as a woman, but I also, and I can't imagine what it's like to identify as a man. But I am also feeling like that message is somewhat universal for all genders, because I think, you know, there is a massive issue with, you know, men feeling like they can't express some forms of themselves, whereas, you know, it's almost a burden for women to have the responsibility to be the emotional ones. But actually, it's, you know, it's a burden for men to not have permission to do that. And I think you are worthy, including your trauma, including your pain, you know, including that need to let it out is something that I would definitely see as kind of almost the same page in that book, of, you know, of writing to myself as everything, you know.
100%. That's badass.
The whole vulnerability thing, as we talk about lessons learned, it's one that I feel like I'm continuing to learn, but I was blocked on it and I don't know if it's because I was a guy or just my personality or whatever, but I don't know. Up into my 40s, definitely, I was the guy that needed to convey to the world that I was impervious, right? That I, you know, had no real weakness and no vulnerability. And I don't know when it happened, but I started sort of playing with vulnerability a little bit and finding out that vulnerability is actually like a superpower. Like it truly is. Like, the more, especially for a man, well, that's my experience. Like, if I can be vulnerable, like really just talk about stuff that's hard to talk about, that goes to that place that's that can could be used against you, right? Because you're exposing some really you know, not like private things, like stuff that shouldn't be talked about, but just some very vulnerable things about who you are. I've never experienced anyone taking advantage of that. I've always experienced that people welcome it and want to support you and think higher of you and think that you're more of a well-rounded person in doing that. And that has been a really transformative, like, later in my life, like in my late 40s, basically. And I've really enjoyed that space. I know some guys never get there. Like, some guys just never allow themselves. And my dad pretty much didn't. Tracy's dad didn't. So it's great to have gotten there, but the earlier the better. Like, you're more human. You're just more, you know, and no one is perfect. So why try pretending? You know?
Absolutely.
Not only that, but also, like, Tom, I'm sure, you've had this with your, like, guy friends. I'm not sure how this relates flipping back to other genders, but at least with guys, like Ella mentioning about the whole feeling like they need to be strong and not being vulnerable and all that kind of stuff. I find that when I'm vulnerable with my guy friends, it allows them to open up and in often cases talk about stuff that they haven't told people for so long, like stuff that it happened months, weeks ago that's been bothering them, that's been building up, you know, and you know, it's something that I do try to do often, but it's also, you know, sometimes everyone just needs that message or that phone call, like, yo, I'm having a hard time right now, how you doing on your end, you know? And it's like, and that, like, that connection, that, like, that bit of vulnerability allows, especially I think within guy to guy interactions, because there's for some reason that safeness barrier that I also think guys get when they're in a relationship, because I think a lot of guys open up to their significant other in a lot of cases, but I think obviously with heterosexual males, that's actually the correct thing, not males, because I assume it might not be the same within the gay community, but with my heterosexual friends, it's hard for them to open up a lot of the time to me as another man, if I'm not being vulnerable with them, which is weird, but also interesting, and also something that I think is one that all guys could learn a little bit off of. If your friend is having a hard time and you can tell he's having a hard time, tell him something about you that's going on that's vulnerable and get him to open up, and that'll open some doors.
It does open doors. I tell you what I'm struggling with balancing at the moment within the lockdown context is the boundaries of accessing vulnerability around my community. I found that a really interesting thing to try and navigate, and it kind of comes out in the way that I'm kind of acknowledging people that need their space, because this is a very intense time, isn't it? But also trying to connect during this distance, and I'm wanting to give people space, and I'm also wanting to remain intimate and close and open and vulnerable, but I'm aware of their kind of exposing nature, and I'm having to balance this idea of how much should I be there? Do they really need space right now? Because it's such a new context to have a friendship within, isn't it? And we don't have this physical intimacy to look each other in the eye, and really meet each other there. So one thing that I've been trying to navigate is how can I safely create this or just maintain this intimacy in like a safe way for everyone. That's been a really funny thing to navigate. I wonder how that's been for you guys.
Tom, do you want to answer that? You go for it.
Well, I think it's trickier, like I don't know, for me as a guy, and especially when I'm in the corporate world as well, there are certain boundaries that are still highly recommended. So you don't want to, even in this relationship, right? I mean, in this conversation right now, me coming into this conversation tonight, I'm aware that I'm 30 years older than you guys, and particularly 30 years older than you, Ella. So I have to be very aware of just how I'm positioning myself in the context of just how we're talking, right? And that pervades itself throughout all conversations. So especially in any kind of formal situation, super, super aware. Informal stuff, yeah, it's a real and I think it's particular to different people as well. Some people, there's more room to explore more, whatever you want to call it, virtual vulnerability or virtual nurturing, but other people less so. So yeah, I think for me, I'm as I get older as well, I'm hyper aware of boundaries, right? Just because,
exactly.
yeah. I don't know how you guys how do you guys feel about the other side of the generational gap? It might not even be something you're aware of, but certainly it's something I think about for sure.
I think in terms of balancing friendships during lockdown and whatnot, I think one thing that I think anyone who talks to me over the internet knows is I'm just the worst at responding to people. I suck at responding because I don't know why, but I find that my whole life goal is to have my phone face down, not touching me. But I often fail at that significantly. And so I think, honestly, lockdown has made me better at responding to people. It's also made me see the value of a message. Pre-lockdown, my thought was messages, not so much. But now I definitely see the value a lot more. Don't get me wrong, I'm still not good at it, but I definitely am I messaged one of my close friends, Ryan, the other day, and we had a really open chat, and that was really nice. It was great for us to be able to connect through messaging, talk a little bit. I also had the same thing with Jacob a couple of days ago where I called him, you know, and so
Nice.
I agree with you though. Different people require different things. Like I know with one friend, I'm going to get through to him with a text message more than I'm going to get through with a phone call, versus another guy I know that he's definitely going to answer the phone, but he's never going to respond to a text message. And so I agree with you, Ella, especially during this lockdown time. One, it's made me more aware of it. Two, it's made me go, wow, I'm realizing how much I want to tailor my time to contacting people as well. And like how when I find myself sat not doing anything, when usually I would have put on a movie or eaten something or started listening to an album of music or whatever it may have been, I now find myself going, oh, let's message someone and see how someone's doing. Like let's pop up and see how someone's doing, kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a good point. Like lockdown has been a weird twist. And I think everyone at the end of this, we need unified group psychiatric help at the end of this lockdown session. But I think honestly though, like, and this is such a perfect segue into what I was wanting to kind of talk about, was the thing that you're involved in called Marma Sessions. Now, I experienced my first one on Sunday last week, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But Ella, like in terms of that, it's such a healing, like beautiful thing for people to be a part of in this lockdown time. Like that is so dope and so needed. And you know, I think something that Tom and you have in common is that Tom does his mindfulness stuff. He's doing a lot of meditation based work through the internet and stuff like that.
Yeah.
People like that. And you with Marma Sessions are doing a lot of similar things from what I've seen in terms of the content that you guys put out and whatnot. And what I wanted to ask is, one, like how you got involved with it, like I guess explain the idea, the concept to people, and then we'll just dive in from there and see where we go.
Cool.
Let's go
Yeah. So Marma Sessions in its kind of fundamental stages was an experiential invitation, I would say, because how it started, it was the concept was conceived from Tara, who's one of our pitcher members at the collective, and she basically wanted to create a space where all kinds of interdisciplinary art forms can collide and actually collaborate without having to add the human element of let's talk and be functional. Let's actually just be and create together. So essentially Marma Sessions usually in its kind of more kind of traditional sense is at Cafe Kino in the downstairs lovely grotto. We've decorated it. We've got textures hanging from the ceiling, and we have a live band. They do improvised jazz. We provide all the art supplies, and people come, gather, they can talk, they can be silent, and essentially it's just an opportunity to make, create, and experience the resonance of live music. And for me, the healing capacity is that you don't need to do the gig thing. You know, you don't need to go and get drunk or be social, or, you know, you can be in your own space. This is your opportunity to dive in. You can still experience the social dynamics, but you don't have to kind of facilitate anyone but yourself. So that's, I think, where it comes from me in terms of that kind of fundamental healing impact. So obviously when lockdown happened, we couldn't bring people together anymore. And, you know, the Marma Sessions, usually they're about 3-4 hours long. So it's, you know, hardcore for the musicians just kind of improvising, but it goes so quickly, you know, it's amazing. So during that process, when people are creating, we then hang all of the artwork around the room so everyone can wander around and people can talk about their art or just kind of leave it there to be observed, even without their presence. So that's a really lovely thing. So we really wanted to bring that community aspect and kind of propel it into this digital field. And obviously we are all experiencing a new type of distance for anyone. So it was hard to kind of conceive of the best way to approach it. But we've settled on live stream where people have the option of coming onto Zoom with us, to kind of just acknowledge that we're all making things together, and at the end of the live stream we all chat and share our art. So there's the kind of intimacy there, and you know, the last few streams we've had people that we don't know, and we've had international people, and it's a really beautiful way of expanding the community in a really organic way. You know, we just go, here's a Zoom hangout if you want to join, and that Zoom hangout is live streamed with the mainstream on the Marma page. So the way that looks is we have picture artists submitting their work. So it might be that they've done a time lapse of the creation of a piece, or it's really close up zooming ins of a piece, or you know, whatever they want to display. So we've kind of got that visual stimulus rolling with usually an hour and a half of improvised music that has been recorded from 6 different locations with the Marma team in our isolation, which is a beautiful way of kind of having kind of a new kind of outlet when it comes to improvisation, because we're not in the room together anymore. You know, you can't just vibe off what's happening, you're vibing off what's happened, because we kind of do it like rounders. You have, you know, layers, and then we pass it on to the next person, and then they add their bit, and it kind of goes on from there. And because that is so magic, I came up with the idea of inviting people to just kind of freestyle as well. So we've in the past we've had pianists submit. I can't remember whose idea that was. I think that was Tara's, which worked amazingly, and it kind of just revealed the potential of, you know, the expansion of the Marma team. And for me, because the kind of roots of Marma are all about kind of going inside, you know, allowing yourself to have that time of reflection and manifestation and creation, I thought it'd be amazing to just hear people talk about how they are. So we invited people to kind of record a monologue, if you like, and we wove it into the sounds, and that was the live stream. We had, you probably had, you know, all kinds of languages come up.
Yeah, it was. So, do you know what's interesting? So, one, I didn't join the Zoom call because just my personal self-confidence was not high on the day, but I intend to in the future, definitely, for sure. I think for me, the thing that was really dope was I was listening to it with my girlfriend, and I was like, this sounds like I'm in a fantasy world. Like, I'm sat here and I'm like, this is really cool. The harpist.
Yes.
I don't know what the definition name for someone who plays a harp is.
I think harpist is pretty good going.
Harpist? Yeah? Okay, cool.
I'd say.
We'll go with harpist. Like, it was awesome. Like, the music was beautiful. A lot of the pieces of writing were really interesting. A couple of them were really nice. Your piece was really awesome. There was just some really nice stuff going on there. And in terms of mental health and healing and helping, and like you said, you know, this space where it allows people to be creative, to take, you know, what would an hour and a half to stop what they're doing for their day after a long day of work, you know, whether that be working from home or being part of essential work in the last couple months and whatnot, or even whether it be dealing with kids and putting the kids to bed, and you know, it's crazy at the moment. And so, you know, to have this place where people can do something creative and also just listen to music, man, like the amount of people that don't get exposure to enough music to just allow them to enjoy some moments of life and listen to it rather than have it just on in the background, you know, it'd be the thing that you are, you know, involved with, you know, it makes it a lot better. And I think honestly it's one of the most awesome ways I've seen to deal with like your mental health issues you might be having during lockdown. Like I'd recommend it to everyone, like even if you just sit and listen. I know for me, like I my thought was next time when there's not when you're doing like one of the pulse ones or when you're doing one of the more music based ones, when there's not voices on top, I'm going to do some writing because I love writing background. So I'm going to do some writing and whatnot. And I think, honestly, there's very few things in life that are that cool. And actually just watching the stream, seeing like there was a couple sat like at the dining table painting together and stuff, and it was just so cute and so like warming and really nice to just see. I think, and they were definitely an older couple as well. When I was looking, I was like, they are definitely an older couple as well. So I was like, this is reaching so many people, and it's helping the
Yeah.
young dude. There's a young guy with like headphones on, like doing his thing, like painting some stuff, and then all the way through to this older couple. And I'm like, you'd see the impact that it's having. See that, and the reason why your numbers are increasing the way they are is because people are seeing it. You know, like anyone who's giving it a try and who allows themselves to buy into it, you know, because that's a big part of it is, you know, I think if you came in with either a pessimistic or sarcastic point of view going into that thing, it can be a very different experience. But if you go in open-minded and buy into what you're being a part of, that's going to help anyone 100%.
It's really lovely to hear, you know, what it's like from your perspective. It's really hard to look at it objectively, but you know, that's the crux of it, isn't it? We want people to have the opportunity to create that space for themselves, you know, all kinds of healing. You know, it definitely provides a platform for us to kind of present it as music therapy in some ways, you know, and, you know, just it sparks that conversation, you know, with what's going on, what's it brought up with you and for you, and, you know, what have you made in that state, and how does that look, and what is your subconscious doing here, and, you know, are you giving it enough attention? Has it been in the background? Or, you know, and creating a gentle way for it to come out. So it's not confrontational with yourself, but actually it's just, you're going, and here's a space every 2 weeks. I just dive right in and we go there.
Yeah.
It's very cool. It's like, the thing that I've watched one on YouTube and I thought it was pretty cool as well, but I didn't really understand. One of the things that it feels like it's doing is just allowing people the freedom to go in whatever little micro interest that they have, right, without feeling any like judgment or any subconsciousness of being I don't know, feeling restrictive in any way. Like you can just go and play in your little playground, and that's okay. That's awesome, because not a lot of places allow you to do that. A lot of places say, come and play, but you're going to play in our playground, and this is the rules to our playground. And some people love it. They're like, oh, I love that playground. It's a great playground. I know exactly what to expect there. But other people are like, I kind of like bits of that playground, but there's some stuff that I always have to leave away from there because it's not, you know, there's not exactly what I want. And this like allows you to really like tailor, to custom make your own jam, right? Like you can do whatever you want,
Totally.
which is pretty cool. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah.
We had someone in the last stream creating a spine out of clay. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And it's beautiful to watch other people's expressions unfold as well live. You know, it's actually happening right there. And just the breadth of diversity within kind of the ways we can express ourselves. And actually the theme for the next Marma Sessions is movement. So we're gonna record the music a little bit earlier this time and actually share it to some dancers who are going to record themselves moving, so that, you know, instead of just kind of visual art, you get the human body, you know, through the live stream as well, which I think will be quite special.
Have you heard of so I was on a meditation retreat and there was a couple there, and I think it was just the guy in the couple was going to this thing called 5 Rhythms.
So one of my friends, Morag Donnelly, she's one of the kind of core team of that. So I've been to one class because she was like, please come, it would be amazing. And I have dyspraxia, which has created a few weird relationships with movement. I find it quite jarring. But the freedom that 5 Rhythms gave me was actually really amazing. I was able to transcend the kind of neuroses that come around moving the body, which was a lovely experience.
Yeah, it sounds like the movement session for Marma is going to be sort of exploring that whole space, which is pretty cool. Yeah,
potentially,
really cool.
I'd love that. Are you a 5 Rhythms? Do you
So we actually we came out of that that meditation retreat on February, no, let's see, it was like March 9th or something like that, and came straight here. Basically, we were in Bristol for 4 days, but Tracy and I were like, where is there a Five Rhythms in Bristol? Because this one was in Cambridge that he went to, and it was a big, like a pretty big group. And we sussed out that there is one in Bristol. And so conceivably, I don't know how this all plays out, but conceivably that would be something that we would definitely explore. But we yeah, like during lockdown, we have played around with just having like a free form dance type night and stuff like that. That's just, yeah, just being like, there's something liberating about just being able to be goofy and weird. Like I was talking to Bodhi about
you and Mum did a free form dance night. You didn't.
Beautiful. I love it. What a lovely way of kind of maintaining something exciting.
Yeah, and it's a way to like let your weird out a little bit, right? Just let your, like, the stuff that you just won't let out to just about anyone in the world in any circumstance. It's important to just let that out a little bit, you know, not just when you're alone in the house and you're just kind of goofing off in front of the mirror or walking down the hallway or whatever. Like let it out and like embrace it, be okay with it. And that's what Marma Session sounds like it is allowing people to do in like this artistic realm. It's really cool. I like it.
Dance is so I'm not sure if we've talked about this much, Ella, but I like did a couple years of dance when I was at college, and it's like such an expressive, powerful form of art and creation that you really don't get from a lot of other ones, especially because the emotion goes two ways with dance. It comes from the dancer and also from the audience. Like it's often that, you know, it's kind of similar with acting and things like that. But I find like whenever I see, I don't know, I've watched a few things, like for example, Tom Sleep No More and things like that. Like there's a performance we watched in New York last time we were there, and it's based over like 5 floors and whatnot, but the actors like move up and down the building and you move with
them. Oh, wow. Amazing.
Super crazy and interactive.
Wow.
They don't talk and everything's done through dance and movement. And I think that is so much more impactful. Like it changes everything. To see emotion through dance is a whole nother level. Like I really, really actually appreciate that you guys are taking that step. That's such a cool, really interesting avenue to go, because I think the dance world is so underappreciated within like creativity generally and like movement. Like people don't appreciate how amazingly freeing, and you know, I often like doing a lot of like freestyle hip hop dance myself and stuff, and I think especially with freestyle, when you're doing stuff that is completely improvised on the spot and you're feeling the music and it's just what is natural, like that is really where, and it's one of the few times in my life where I feel really pure, like really where I feel
it's raw.
Raw is exactly it. Like it's almost like nature. Like I feel like connected to nature in those moments, in terms of like, by nature I mean like years of generations of men dancing around fires, you know, and like to like bare skin drums and whatnot. You know? It's there and it stays there, and I 100% feel that. I think that's a great guys to move forward and find a new way of expression. I think that's dope. Really dope.
It's nice that, you know, to hear your relationship with it as well, because I think there is, you know, kind of the reality of being so raw kind of prevents me from exploring that side of physical movement a lot of the time, you know, particularly because I have got this kind of neurological predisposition. You know, it does create like a really fascinating relationship with movement as a whole, and like having a body, like just having a thing, like I've got an Ella attached to me, it's mental. So, you know, learning how to navigate that, and you know, and then moving it in a beautiful way, or not and then the next stage for me is not having to be beautiful, and I think that is really like where it becomes really profound, and it's like an act of self-service, isn't it, really? And it's definitely something that I don't do enough. I think yoga's been a new thing in my life. I've been doing yoga every day in lockdown, and I knew it was going to enter my space at one point, and it's happened. So that's been a really nice kind of dip in the pool of movement. So it's lovely to hear that it's impacted you so much, because it is amazing.
Yeah, Tom's the yoga guy. Tom, you reap the benefits of yoga and have done since I was maybe 12, 11 years old. I've been watching you bend yourself in obscure. I walk downstairs and see you bent in like the craziest human press fucking scene, and I'm like,
great,
what's going on over here?
Yeah, no, with like plenty of jokes attached to that.
That's a big thing in our house. Whenever Tom's doing yoga, me and my mum and constantly just heckle and rib Tom while he's doing it. It's just a consistent thing. Yeah.
No, yoga's it's I've been doing Ashtanga yoga forever. But I've recently, like, I guess it's maybe been since lockdown or maybe just before, been doing this thing called yin yoga, which is staying in a pose for, you can stay, I guess, in for like 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but I've done like 5 minutes. And yeah, it's a nice counterbalance to Ashtanga, which is a very movement-based yoga. And also it's very meditative. So this yin yoga, getting in a pose and just chilling in that pose, I do it with my eyes closed, and it, I can not quite get into those meditative states, but I feel like I'm getting, quite similar states, and it just unlocks things a little bit as well. So that's been kind of cool. But yoga for like older folks, like, I don't really do gym stuff or anything like that, but yoga has maintained my body in ways that just I don't think anything else can. It just has been like a miracle like thing for me. So definitely recommend it for, if you start it now as well. Yeah. Like, you'll be bouncing around in your 90s.
And it's so holistic as well. I love the idea that there's a whole yoga practice dedicated to kind of almost stagnant movement, but it doesn't feel stagnant because you're like creating all of that prana. But I feel like the things that I've been most attracted to in my practice have been where I've had to remain still, and I'm following an instructor who's just in that pose, and I'm like, okay, let's really commit. And that's where the biggest developments happen for me, where I have to just remain still and really hold myself accountable for really honoring how profound it could be. And yeah, I love the idea. What was it called? I might look it up, because it sounds like it's something that would really suit.
Yeah, the one that, and I don't know much about it at all. Someone just told me about it over dinner, and I basically just do my own positions but it's called yin yoga, YIN.
Okay.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Do you know what, Ella, something you just said that's something that I want to bring up about and like how I've been dealing with it. Holding yourself accountable. What a phrase you said. And you're like, holding myself accountable for making sure that I'm like keeping these positions. I've been doing like maybe about a week of spattered workouts. I'll call it spattered because it is spattered. It is sparse and like infrequent. But to me, it's finding that strength to hold myself accountable to get up and actually do it that I'm definitely struggling with. Like, I do it with other things. Like, I get up and I definitely, make the bed, and I'll eat this and I'll do that, and I'll like, paw around the flat as much as I can in terms of taking care of business. But, finding that drive to get up and do something physical inside the flat is the one that's zapping me the most. And I want to say it's because I'm like stuck not like going out skating because I'm injured at the moment and stuff like that. But honestly, like, just very little motivation. I think lockdown definitely paying a big price to that. But also the time to gain that strength. So it's something that I'm definitely working on. But I loved how you were like, I'm holding myself accountable. I was like, yeah, that's exactly something I need to work on.
I think it's important. And I think when you do hold yourself accountable and when you do commit, then you're allowing yourself to have a quick glimpse into the longevity of the impact of it. And for me, I kind of wove it into my day to day, because my days are so big, and often I'll get to like 10 p.m. and I've just finished my last meeting, and it's like, whoo, and now I've got to go to bed. So, you know, and the thing with me, I'm kind of on the edge of burnout. I'm having to really kind of be mindful at the moment, because I'm finding myself trying to clutch at this idea of having an evening for that time for myself, because I feel like I've acted in service all day, and, you know, actually giving myself some nurturing is really important. But starting my day going, you know what, I have just given myself that time to really, you know, wake up early, prepare myself, and actually align everything as much as possible to make sure that I have, you know, really grounding kind of self-love reflection experience in the morning. Because I started my yoga practice, and actually I was just whacking them in when I had time. So sometimes I'd do it at 8 a.m. Sometimes I'd be sneaking it in at like 11:30 before bed, you know, like it was really kind of sporadic, like you were saying. And I think it settled when I realized, oh, this isn't just something that I should do as a tick box. This is so much more than that. This is like a profound act of self-love, and really, like, it's the armor, and it can be the armor for the day as well. And it was kind of that realization. I was like, oh, this isn't just yoga, you know, this isn't just a thing you to be doing. This is, you know, the foundation of a day, and it has the potential to be that.
That's, you know, that's a really good way to look at it. Something, you know, advice I will heed, and words I will think about tomorrow when I wake up and I drag my lazy ass over to the floor to do some press ups or something.
You know what I've like, because I've, you know, and this kind of goes back to this, you know, being kind to yourself, and you know, having aspirations of doing things in a day, and you get through some of them. Some days you get through all of them, some days you feel amazing, and some days you don't get through any of them, and depends how you feel. Sometimes you feel like shit and all of that. But I mean, for me, the two things that have really worked are, one is to put the most important things at the beginning of the day, and almost like have nothing else, like the stuff that other stuff that needs to be done, or other stuff that I enjoy or whatever, comes after this thing that needs to be done. So that's one. And then the second is strip away everything and just come to the day and say, what is the one main thing, one thing that if I do that one thing today, it will make it a better day.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care about, you know, like all that other stuff. I need to eat, and I probably need to bathe, and I need to talk to this person. I need to do these things. But if I can do this one thing, I know it will help me. That's also been something that's been, because sometimes that's all you can do. You can just muster one thing in a day.
Totally.
Yeah.
Tom, I love how you assume that you're probably going to need to bathe. It's just...
I mean, who's clocking it? We're in isolation.
Exactly.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think, you know, and especially like talking about like Marma Sessions, and you actually bring this into like physicalness, and also the whole creativity, and you mentioned service and stuff. One thing that I've learned, and, you know, me and Tom definitely talk about, and it's something that I implement in my life. I know, Tom, you definitely work hard to implement it in yours, and I know Mum does as well. It's like a big part of how us as family, as individuals, operate with day-to-day life. And it's basically that doing something creative, doing some exercise, and doing a little bit of service, you know, like you said, Ella, where it's unconditional, you're doing something for someone else. Really, the benefits that you're reaping are very little. You're doing something out of literally the kindness of your heart. Each one of those things, down to a chemical level, and I'm talking about past and everything, hormone-wise, will release serotonin and dopamine within your system and make you feel better. You know, at the end of the day, if again, going out to anyone who listens to this, you know, if you are struggling, do some exercise, be creative, use, you know, Marma Sessions every 2 weeks to find that creativity, to find that place to be creative. You know, on top of that, do things for other people. You see someone who you like what they're wearing, tell them they look good in the street. You'd be surprised how good you feel about it and they feel about it as you both walk away. You know, it's just what it is, you know, and I think that's so important. I think, like you said, and both of you acknowledge, getting it done at the beginning of the day means that you're instantly in that serotonin section for a good, like, portion of your day going forward, then, just based off of, you know, hormones. So I think that's a really good point. The morning is the better time to be hitting, especially exercise at least. You know, it definitely is one of the bigger boosts. But I would say creativity as well. If you can get up and do something creative, that's on
Totally.
level.
It's about where it feels good in your day, so it doesn't feel like a task, but it's just like, this is what I do now.
Yeah, 100%.
What were you going to say, Tom?
No, I was going to say, like, that again, sort of tapping into a previous point that we had, which was there are preconceived notions of what exercise is or what creativity is, and you have to kind of embrace again, like, your own little thing, your own little weird. So exercise does not have to be, you know, gym like things.
Totally.
Exercise can be going out in the garden and doing stuff, or doing some DIY stuff, or, you know, going for a walk. You know, it's whatever, like, works for you is the thing that's gonna like be there on the days you don't want to do it, right? And it's the same with creativity. Like, creativity does not have to be with, like, you know, this art canvas behind you and this, you know, this beret on your head, and, you know, it can be like, Tracy is about as artistic a person as I know, and she does it in the kitchen, and she's creating like, you know, masterpieces twice a day.
Absolutely.
You know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So it's like, do the thing that, don't worry about, like, look at the definition of what creativity means. It just means I'm producing something that wasn't there before, and I can do that in different ways. That you know, can be on the computer, can be in the garden, could be on a piece of paper, whatever. And yeah, that seems to be a problem that people have, which is this preconceived notion of, this is what I need to do because this person has told me that exercise is this, so if I don't do that, I'm a failure. No, you're not. Just do your own jam, right? Bounce around the house. Do like, you know, whatever it is. Yeah.
Hula hoop in the park. Shit. Like,
yeah.
what you need to do. Like, I agree. And I think that's the bigger thing that I often find as well with, I think, our generation, like, well, not our generation, that's wrong. The people that are our age, and it spans all generations of people that are 20, is someone finding that thing that is, like, finding that thing that allows them to not be like, wow, this is a fucking chore, and allows it to be, like you guys have said, you know, that fun, interesting thing that you can do, as something that is helping you mentally as well as possibly physically, you know, in other ways, creatively, because, you know, maybe you use the art and sell it, or, you know, whatever, you know, however you do it. But I think that's also important to bear in mind as well. But yeah, it's super important, especially with what's going on at the moment. Like, I can't stress how much also communication in a time like this has been fucking key to, like, absolutely everyone. Ella, we're coming up to like an hour and a half, and this is again a perfect little segue. What we'll do is we'll round it off here. We'll end it off because you said, you know, you've had long days, needed some self-help, some self-love, some self-maintenance, some self-care, whatever it may be, however you want to put it. This has been awesome. This has been such a
thank you so much for having me.
Freaking love this. This has been so dope. I've had 3 people message me while we've been doing this as well, who have tuned in on the live and have said that they love the podcast.
How lovely.
They've really enjoyed it. So thank you so much, Ella. Like, go enjoy some of that self-help and some of that love and some of that peace, because you earn it. And thank you so much. We wouldn't be doing this today if it weren't for you. So thank you so much.
Oh, guys, it's an honor to have, you know, an evening to spend with you, and, you know, have, you know, a place to really kind of meet ourselves again. Like we were saying, it kind of all comes into a nice complete circle, doesn't it? So thank you for providing the space as well. You know, it's a really exciting project that you're starting, and, you know, obviously I'm really, really thrilled to be, you know, in the foundations of it, in the kind of first initial phases.
And we will on in the future 100%. Not only that, but also we'd love to get some more of, like, the Marma crew on, and, like, maybe the band.
Brilliant. You guys, beautiful.
And see what we can do in the future.
That'd be amazing. Well, the next Marma Sessions is on the 14th of June. So look out for that one.
Is that just like Marma Sessions on Facebook, Instagram, like
Absolutely.
kind of stuff?
MARMA Sessions, all one word. We're the orange, can't miss us.
Banging.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
To superstar. Cheers.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Ella.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Take care.
Right. I'm